Where and when were you born?
I was born in Mildenhall, England, on November 25th, 1963.
And what was it like during your time in England?
I don't really remember. I don't remember my time in England because my father was in the Air Force, and we moved from England when I was only 6 months old. So I don't really remember England at all.
Did you have any siblings?
I do. I have 4 older siblings. I have okay. Yeah. I have 2 older brothers and 2 older sisters. In the order of birth, it goes. His oldest brother is Tommy, or Thomas. He was named after my father, Thomas Cullum Wilkie, the second. And then was my sister Debbie. Her name is Deborah Ann Wilkie. And then my sister my brother Wayne was Wayne Allen. And my sister Susie is Susan Angela Wilkie. And then myself.
Okay. What was it like growing up with so many siblings?
It was hard being the youngest. It had its pros and cons. You know, a lot of times I got spoiled. According to my siblings, I was spoiled, being the youngest, being the baby of the family. But then in the other times, it's like I had to, any mistakes they made, at least I learned from their mistakes and didn't repeat it. But at the same time, my parents, disciplined them. And then when it came to me, I kind of got the brunt of everything. Whenever they messed up, it would all fall back. So I was restricted on a lot of things that I couldn't do. Like they could go and stay out late at night, but then when they got in trouble staying out late at night, that made it even worse on me, where my parents wouldn't let me stay out late at night because they just knew from my older siblings that it just meant trouble. So.
Well, were there some things that you were allowed to do that they weren't growing up?
I was really the only one that played sports. I mean, it wasn't so much that they weren't allowed to play sports. I was just the only one that chose to play any sports. And I did swimming, and I did softball, and field hockey, and stuff like that.
Did they show you support at your games?
The video, the face went off. Oh, okay. My brothers and sisters, no. I mean, but they didn't come to any of my sporting events because I think it was just the large age difference. My brother Tommy is 11 years older than me, so by the time I started getting into sports at age 8, he was already 19 and he had already gone off and joined the Army. And same with my sister Debbie, had gone off and she got married at 18, so she was already gone out of the house as well. And my brother Wayne and my sister Susie, they didn't take an interest. But my parents were always there to support me.
Do you feel like you're closer with some of your siblings today because of the time that you got to spend with them or didn't get to spend with them?
I think that my siblings and I are closer, or have a close bond. Not so much of the lack of time or the majority of time that we spent with each other, but it's more so the family values that my parents raised us in. My mom came from an extremely large family of 12 kids. She was 11 of 12 kids, so we had a lot of aunts and uncles. Then in turn, our aunts and uncles had children, which were our cousins, and we spent a lot of time with them. So I think it was just about family values and just caring for each other. And so I feel like I'm close to all my brothers and sisters. I mean, obviously more so because I'm an adult, and when I became an adult, and when I got married, and then of course when I had children of my own, we all shared a more common bond as opposed to when they were adults and I was not yet an adult. We were close, but of course, not as close because I had no, there was no commonality between the two. You know, there was no common um, factor between us. I wasn't an adult yet, so I didn't know what they were going through as far as paying bills and having a job and raising a family and stuff like that until I hit that part of my life. And then I think we all became a lot closer.
Um, was there a favorite sibling?
Do
Was
I have a
there- was
favorite? Do
there-
I have a favorite sibling, or is there a favorite sibling in the family? Well, of course, all four of my siblings are going to say that I was the favorite, that I was my parents' favorite, because I was the baby and I was Miss Goody Two Shoes. I never got in trouble. I didn't. I didn't have an opportunity to get in trouble, because, like I said, when they all got in trouble, you know, they learned what not to let me do. So I didn't have an opportunity to get in trouble. And so, of course, my siblings are going to say I was the favorite. But if I were to choose to have a favorite, I think I gravitate probably more to my oldest brother, Tommy, because he's experienced so much in his life. First of all, being the oldest and and my father being in the military, he's the one that had to move the most, being the oldest child. He had to move so many times. Um, but he's very successful in his life. He's very smart. He's never, you know, he's always taken a negative and turned it into a positive. And I think I look up to him for that, and I gravitate towards him. But I mean, I'm close to all my siblings. I mean, I wouldn't say that I have a favorite. Like, I just like the other three less than one. You know.
How many places did you live growing up?
Well, obviously, I was born in England, and then I think, from what I was told, we moved to France for a short period of time when I was still real little. Like, I was, between 6 months and a year and a half to 2 years old. And then my memory really starts when we lived in Newburgh, New York. That's where I start remembering some things about my childhood. And then we moved from New York to Virginia, and then I've lived in Virginia since I was 5.
What were the things that you start remembering?
Um, Events, not so much good things, but more, in a sense, traumatic to me. I think what I remember has been elaborated through my siblings and parents' stories. Like, I'll never forget. There's 2 occasions, or actually 3. One being the first was we had a big white house, and there was a pond behind our house. Now, it wasn't a little pond. I mean, it was like, to me, it was huge. Okay. And my brother Wayne and I think my brother Tommy was there. They were fishing, and my brother Wayne caught a snapping turtle. I mean, it was like this big around. I mean, snapping turtles are huge, so it's like a big one. And he caught it. Well, of course, you're not going to stick your hand in the mouth of a snapping turtle to try to get the hook out. So he smashed the snapping turtle with his boot. He stepped on the snapping turtle on the shell and crushed it. It killed it. And so I remember that. That was kind of traumatic. And then another time, I'll save the best one for last though. And then another time, my parents had gone out, and then the rest of us kids were all home, obviously, and the lights. It was storming outside, and the lights had gone out, and in the dark rain, we went across the street. We had to go across the street and kind of up a long hill driveway to our neighbor's house. I want to say it was the Murphys, but I can't remember their last name very clearly. So he went up across the street over to their house because we were all scared. And as we were walking across the street, someone had hung a like a scarecrow dummy, had hung it across the wires, the street line, like the telephone line, had hung it over top over the street line, and so it was hanging over the street, and it scared the crap out of me. And so it was scary because it was raining, it was dark, and all the lights were out. And so anyway, that was another event. But of course, the most traumatic, memorable event is what happened to me. I was 4, and I think I was 4. I'm pretty sure I was 4. My sister Susie was teaching me how to ride a bike, and she had, it was an old time bike where you had the bike seat, and then behind the seat was like a little book carry rack, like a little straight rack, and I was sitting on that, and Susie was sitting on the seat, and I was sitting on a little book rack, and I was holding on to Susie, and we were going down our driveway. Well, our driveway was paved, but the rest of the on each side of the driveway were gravel rocks, and she hit one of the rocks, had gotten into the driveway or whatever, and she hit the rock, and we both fell off the bike. Well, I fell into the gravel, and it ripped my whole face up. It got gravel, and just my whole face was bleeding and everything. And I ended up going to the hospital, and they had to, from what I was told, they said they had to have 7 hospital staff members hold me down, in addition to strapping my arms down, in order to get all the gravel out of my face. Like they wouldn't sedate me because of my age, so they had to hold me down and strap me down to clean my face. And
did you have any good memories?
Well, not in New York. I don't remember like good things in New York. I remember, we had family time, stuff like that. But those are the 3 things I remember most from New York. And then, like I said, when we moved here to Virginia, of course, I was about to start kindergarten, which my mom kind of falsified my birth certificate. So I actually, because I wasn't born until November, which was after the September cutoff date, so she changed my birth month from November. She put it as August, or I think it was August. And so I actually started kindergarten when I was 4, but they thought I was already 5. And I couldn't tell anybody it was my birthday when it really was my birthday. Because they would have known. So, but I coming to Virginia, I remember doing, helping my brother with a paper route. We had a little wagon. We'd roll up all the newspapers and rubber band them together, and we stacked them all in the wagon, and then we'd walk the whole neighborhood and deliver newspapers. I did that with my brother Wayne. That was a lot of fun. And we got our first dog, Charlie. He was a poodle, and I loved him. So a lot of good memories. I had a tree fort and climbed trees. I was a big tomboy when I was growing up.
Did you have a lot more guy friends than girl friends?
Yes. Absolutely. I couldn't even tell you. I think the first girlfriend that I had wasn't until 6th grade. 6th or 7th grade, yeah. I hung out with boys. I was a tomboy. We used to run through the sewer tunnels, the sewer lines. We'd run through them and play war, and I was all into BB guns and, like I said, climbing trees, building forts, and stuff like that.
Why do you think you were a tomboy? Like, if you had older sisters?
I think it was because, like I said, Debbie, so Tommy was 11 years older than me, Debbie's 10 years older than me, and then Wayne is 6 years older than me, and Susie is 5 years older than me. And I think that 5 year gap, being Susie being my closest sibling, you know, my sister Susie, she started dating when she was 13 years old. Well, I was only 8 when she was 13. So by the time, she just didn't really, I mean, I never like played dolls with my sisters. I only had one doll that I remember all my life, and that was Mrs. Beasley. And it was a Miss Beasley's doll from a show called Family Affair. And it was a real popular doll. And that was the only doll that I can remember. Like, I never had Barbie dolls or anything. I just didn't, you know?
What were your parents like as you were growing up? Like, how did they treat you and act?
Well, my dad, after he got out, he retired from the Air Force when we left New York. Like I said, I was 4 when we left New York, and that he got out of the Air Force. That he retired. He retired as a master sergeant, which is a rank in the enlisted Air Force. So he wasn't an officer. He was like an enlisted officer, I guess you would say. I guess it's called. So then when we moved to Virginia, he joined the Fairfax County Sheriff's Department. Well, at that time, Sheriff's Department was like, you had the Fairfax County Police, and then you had the Sheriff's Department. Well, I mean, Sheriff's Department, you could get pulled over by the Sheriff's Department, stuff like that. So my dad was, he was strict, but he wasn't like a drill sergeant. Like I said, by the time I grew up, my parents knew what not to let me do. I don't mean to keep repeating that. But, so they weren't it didn't appear to me that they were as lenient with me as they were my siblings. But, my mom was very loving, very caring, always, willing to spend time. My mom suffered from multiple sclerosis from the first time I can remember is when we moved to Virginia. So, like I said, I was 4, and I think my mom was in her 40s. I think she was around 43 or 44. She had me late in life. She didn't have me until she was like in her mid to late 30s. And so she ended up getting multiple sclerosis. And so she was, as years went on, her physical ability was very limited. She started off using a cane, and then it turned from a cane to more of a it's like a double arm cane, and then she went from that to like a walker, and then eventually in my adult years, she ended up being in a wheelchair. She could take a few steps, but she couldn't walk more than 3 feet by herself. So she was assisted a lot, but she was always there supporting me, and loved to spend time with my mom, and we'd go play bingo. Bingo was her biggest thing. She loved to go play bingo. So we played bingo, and we'd go to the Knights of Columbus. My dad belonged to, it's almost like the Moose Lodge and Elks Club, stuff like that. It's called Knights of Columbus. And I did the swim team for Knights of Columbus, and then we'd spend time, doing social events at the Knights of Columbus. We'd go to their Easter picnics, summer picnics, family events. We just spent a lot of weekends at the Knights of Columbus because it was just very family oriented.
Was it you and your parents, or you and your siblings and your parents?
It was majority of the time. It was me. It was just me and my parents.
Because your other siblings were gone, right?
Right. Yeah.
What was it like being the only child still at home when you were a teenager?
Great. It was great. It obviously, there was nobody to argue with. It didn't last long because my sister Susie, closest to me, she had moved out, but then like 2 years later she moved back in. So I really only had 2 years kind of by myself as being an only child in the house, because Susie had moved back in. But then eventually, a few years later, she got married and moved out. Finally moved out. But being the only child in the house, it was just, I don't know, it was better. It was like being an only child. You didn't have to fight over anything. Whose was whose, and you got to eat as much as you wanted. You didn't have to share, meals with anybody, and just to have more of your parents' attention. Being an only child, they weren't torn in, 4 or 5 different directions.
What types of activities did you do, like, as a teenager?
Other than sports?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, what would you do, like, at home when you were?
Well, I was still somewhat of a tomboy even as a teenager. I loved to go skateboarding. I'd skateboard in my neighborhood. But like I said, it started about 6th grade, so that's about 12 years old, 12, 13 years old. I started having friends who were girls, but I also had friends that were guys, but we all kind of hung out together. And I think the worst thing as far as like being bad, if I were to have gotten into trouble, is we'd TP houses, toilet paper. It's called TP. So we'd toilet paper houses, but I mean we wouldn't do it all the time, but we TP'd houses. We just kind of hung out, ride bikes. I mean, back then, we're talking in the 70s. I mean, we'd go bike riding and we'd walk everywhere. I mean, we'd walk 4 or 5 miles to go to the store, and that was fun for us, to be able to go that far. I mean, we just walk we didn't really rely on our parents to drive us anywhere,
Are there any, like, specific memories that you have with that group of friends that you enjoyed or didn't enjoy?
Yeah. I mean, as a matter of fact, most of those groups of friends, I went to high school with. Of course, we lived in the same neighborhood, and we go to high school. And now I've found them on Facebook, and we've communicated a little bit on Facebook. Now, their popularity was different than my popularity. I wasn't, like I said, I was into sports, so I hung more with the sports jocks, you would say. But
Well, what kind of popularity did they have?
burners. No, burners. Like they'd smoke cigarettes, and I didn't smoke cigarettes, so we call them burners.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be. They just didn't do sports, but I still hung out with them.
How did you get to be friends with them then?
Just from the neighborhood.
Oh, so they lived
Just
around
we all lived on King Richard Drive, where I lived in Annandale. Was like it was a horseshoe, so it started at one end and went all the way around to another end, and then it had other streets inside that same neighborhood, but we all lived on King Richard Drive. But getting back to your question about memories, especially in the wintertime, we had the best time in the wintertime because there was one street that was called Chanticleer, Chanticleer, I think it was spelled Chanticleer. It was like Dead Man's Hill. It was like straight down, and then it curved, and we'd always go sledding down that hill, and it was the best fun. It was some of the best times we had.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any negative memories from hanging out with them?
Not that I can remember. No, no. We all just kind of got along. Like I said, it wasn't by that point. We weren't into like building forts or anything like that. We'd just go to the pool in the summertime, and then in the wintertime, like I said, we'd go sledding, or we'd have snowball fights, stuff like that. When you get to be at the point of being a teenager, you just kind of hang out.
You said that you hung out with more of the sports crowd. So what kind of sports did you play growing up and as a teenager
Well,
in school?
when so um so for 6th grade, I went to Canterbury Woods. It was elementary school. Had 6th grade. Then when I started 7th grade is when I went into high school, because the school I was going to, Lake Braddock, it was called Lake Braddock Secondary School. Secondary school meant 7th through 12th grade, so it basically was like going into high school at 7th grade. So when I started high school is when I got into the high school sports, and I did softball, powder puff football, and I played field hockey for a year. But mostly softball. I did softball all through high school.
How was school, like actual academics during that time?
How well did I do?
Yeah, like what was school like?
Big. Lake Braddock is the school itself is, I want to say, I think it's almost a mile long, or it's a mile all the way around. So I think it's a half mile long. Being a 7th grader, like I said, you're only 13 years old, and you're in a school with 18-year-olds, and so it's intimidating. But academic-wise, as far as my grades and stuff like that, what was really cool about Lake Braddock was they each grade was divided up into what was called a sub-school. And so grades 7 and 8 was sub-school 1 and 2. Okay? Well, in each sub-school, they had a few classrooms, like actual closed-door classrooms, and most of those were like the science classes because of the lab work and stuff like that. But all your other classes, your math, your English, your history, and stuff like that, those were all in open areas. I mean, it was like being in a big library, and there wasn't anything dividing the other classes from your class except for a little wall, a little short divider wall that they would move around. But it was just like a short wall. I mean, you could see over top of the wall, So sometimes you'd be sitting in your class, say you're sitting in your English class, you could hear the English class next to you. So a lot of times, if I was bored, I wouldn't be paying attention to my teacher, and I'd listen to the teacher next to us. And sometimes it worked out to my benefit because they'd be like a day ahead of us in their learnings, in their academic learnings, and so they were learning what I was just about to learn, and so by the time my class learned it, I already knew it from the class next door. So it's almost like, I don't want to call it cheating, but I would listen to the answers that they would have in their class, and then I would know what the answers were in my class.
Were there any subjects that you excelled in?
I liked English. I mean, probably English and history. I did really poorly in math. Math was not my strong subject at all. I liked science. Science was pretty interesting. I was pretty much the only one that could tolerate the dissection of the frog, and dissecting a frog and stuff like that, which I thought was pretty cool. And I think a lot of, like I said, growing up, being a tomboy, and like I said, running through the sewers growing up, I think I was able to tolerate a lot, Oh, but I got a great story for high school, though.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Okay. So, my high school was so cool. I'll never forget, my English teacher was Mrs. Price. And there was a competition. There was like a competition in, I think I was in 8th or 9th grade at the time. And it was actually, you'll get a kick out of this. It was a pinball contest, like a pinball machine.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever could score the highest on a pinball machine.
Mm-hmm.
and it out of like 100 people, it came down to myself and my teacher, Mrs. Price, and she ended up winning. And I was so pissed that I didn't win the pinball machine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I'm like, I told her, I was like, Miss Rice, what are you gonna do with a pinball machine?
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I was so. It's almost like to this day, I kind of still am bitter about it. You know, because I wanted that pinball machine. Because it was a time that Elton John had come out with the song "Pinball Wizard."
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought that was the coolest song. And I'm like, I'm a pinball wizard, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was one of my that was one of my memories, you know, for high school. And then a couple of subjects. The screen went dark, like it's not as bright. Oh, okay. You know, subjects back then in the late 70s, in early 80s, because I graduated in 1982. Subjects then are kind of the same subjects they have now, but different in a sense. So I took it was called stenography. Okay, stenography consisted of both typing on a manual typewriter, not a computer, on a manual typewriter where you had to like hit the return. You know, I don't know if you've ever seen one of those before. Maybe in a museum you've seen one, but it consisted of typing and taking shorthand. Have you ever heard of shorthand? Okay, shorthand. It's called Greg shorthand, and there were 2 levels: Greg 1 and Greg 2. And back then, the profession of being like a court stenographer. You've heard of court stenographers, right? Where a court stenographer is someone in a court of law, right? And when there's a trial going on, you know, they're either typing, and what they're typing is they're typing what the people, they're transcribing what the people are saying, you know, the prosecutor, the defendant, stuff like that, and the judge. And then another part of being a court stenographer, you would take dictation or transcribe using shorthand. And what it is it's a symbol. It's a use of a symbol for words. Like saying, if you say "I will," the "I will" symbol would be a long line with a little curly Q at the end. You know. So I was taking that, and that was called stenography. So I learned how to type and do stenography. I had Miss Williams as my teacher, so she was probably one of my favorite teachers. Was Miss Williams for that class, and then. Of course, we took home economics, which now is called family. Well, I don't think it's called home ec anymore. They call it
home ec when I did.
Yeah, but I think that they at Crystal's school they call it like family life and something like that. Family life, you know. So you learn how to cook, how to sew, how to take care of a baby, you know, stuff like that. So. Those, I mean, a lot of those were pretty cool classes, you know. Doing PE, I took drama. Took drama in school. That was really cool because our school had a theater in it, not like a theater to watch movies, but to put on plays and productions. And I was in a play. I was in the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang play, and that was fun. But I love my drama class. Mr. Rubin was my teacher for drama. And I think why I excelled so well in drama is, once again, going back to being the youngest of 5 kids, and my mom came from an Italian family, so Italians talk a lot and they talk loud. So my family was kind of loud, and me being the youngest, I had to kind of, if I wanted to be heard, I had to talk over everybody else. So Mr. Rubin said that I had great projection in my voice because I would talk loud. And I remember our first assignment was we had to take a song and read it without singing it. And you think that's easy to do, and it's not. It's like trying to say your alphabet, saying the ABCs without singing it. And so we had to take a song and just read it as if you were like in a dramatic play. And so that was one of my first assignments in class. I thought that was pretty cool.
Were there any, like, did anything, like, scary happen during high school?
There was one thing that was scary. We had, there was a girl that, she was bullied. I didn't know her, but she was bullied. She ended up committing suicide because she was bullied. And then a kid came to school. Now, once again, we're talking about the 70s, where I'm not saying it's common now for kids to be bringing guns to school type thing. But back in the 70s, it was unheard of. The worst thing that kids would ever do back in the 70s is like do drugs. But a kid had brought a gun to school and held our principal, Mr. Allwood, had held him hostage for a couple of hours.
For what?
And I don't know why. He was angry at the school. I don't know if, I don't know if the kid had gotten in trouble at the school or what. But it was, the school day had already ended, and he went into the school like after school ended. But you know how the teachers and staff members are still there, and then so the kids weren't. There were kids at the school at the time, like doing after school activities and stuff like that. But it wasn't like a regular school during the school day. Regular school day.
Were you there?
I wasn't there. No.
Did you have any jobs while you were a teenager?
I did. My very first job at 16, I worked at Arthur Treacher's in Annandale, and I was just a cashier. That was a lot of fun. I made some friends there. It wasn't far from my house, so I would walk to work every day. We walked a lot. Yeah, we didn't get driven, or we didn't drive. I didn't. At 16, I didn't get my driver's license until I want to say it had to have been my junior year. Because my junior year, I went to school half day and worked half day. I actually worked at the Fairfax County School Board in Fairfax, in the city of Fairfax. So I went to school half day, and then I was like a clerk, admin clerk. Like sometimes I'd answer phones, but mostly I'd do like a lot of filing and running errands, like taking deliveries from one office to another office and stuff like that. So I think that had a lot to do with where I am now in my life, as far as like being in an office and being a secretary, is having that.
Why did you not get your license until later?
Because it wasn't uncool to ride the bus. It was actually more cool to ride the bus because you got to hang out with your friends. And plus my parents, they weren't going to buy me my first car. I mean, back then, you either bought your own first car yourself, or you got a hand-me-down. And my first car was a hand-me-down, but it was so freaking hard to drive because it was a Datsun 500, and it was what they call a 3-speed on the column, which instead of shifting gears down here, you shifted gears on the shifter was on the steering column. And it wasn't easy to shift gears. The steering was manual steering, not automatic. So manual meant it was like, you're pulling and pulling, to just make a left-hand turn.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't, you just didn't go like that. I mean, you had to like pull it hard because it was all manual.
Mm-hmm.
You had to turn it. Mm-hmm. And so that was basically my first car, and that, like I said, that was a hand-me-down. And then I was able to, through my job, save enough money to buy my first car, which was a Horizon. It was a Plymouth Horizon TC3, and it was just so the maker was Plymouth, the model was a Horizon, and it was a Horizon TC3. And I had the license plate. I got first time I had ever gotten a personalized license plate, and the license plate said Lean 1, Lene 1. So, and it had a sunroof in it. And it was real cool, silver. It was so cool. It was a cool car. Uncle Eric actually bought it from me. Yeah, and then he wrecked it.
So you had met Daddy by that point.
Well, no, I didn't meet Daddy until after I graduated high school.
How'd you meet him?
After I graduated high school, I got a job at a company in Tyson's Corners, McLean, Virginia. Tyson's considered McLean. The company was called Task, TASC, and I was working as a word processor. So that's pretty much when computers started evolving. But instead of having, you know how like you put CDs in the computers now? Well, our memory disks were this big. I mean, well, maybe about that big. They're like 8 inches. The disc, so we'd have put in, it was almost like a floppy disk. So you put in a floppy disk. So as a word processor, I had to transcribe meeting notes and proposals and stuff like that. So Task was a government contracting company, and Daddy worked for a construction company called Grumman Construction, and he along with Mike Grumman and another guy came into our office to do some remodeling. We were taking one big office and putting a wall up to divide it into 2 offices, and he came in to put that wall up, and that's how I met him.
And what was it like when you met him?
He had a girlfriend at the time. He had a girlfriend. Her name was Tangela. I never met her. I mean, when I first met him, actually, funny story is, when I first met him, you know, here he was. I mean, he was cute, but Daddy's short. I mean, he's 5'4", right? Well, Mike Grumman, who owned the company, was a lot taller, and he was cute too. So I actually started going out with Mike Grumman first, but then it's like he and I just really, I think Mike Grumman was more of a player, you know, and I think after a while, after Mike Grumman and I started going out, I think Daddy, Mike, kept asking Mike Grumman, hey, are you still seeing that girl Kathy, you know, blah, blah, blah. So I think Mike Grumman saw that my daddy was more interested in me than Mike Grumman was. And so Mike Grumman told me, he goes, I think, we're not going to work out type thing. And he goes, but I know Mike Vandermark is really interested in you, you know. And I was like, well, he has a girlfriend. He's like, no, he broke up with her. And I was like, okay, so that's when. And then I started dating Mike.
Well, how the heck did that even happen? Like, so you broke up with this guy,
and then turn around and started dating.
Like, how'd you start talking to him? Like, did you just, hey, I heard you liked me, like?
I think Mike Grumman gave Daddy my phone number, and he just called me up and he's like, hey, I got a motorcycle, you want to go for a ride? And it was cool. He had a motorcycle, and I was like, sure. And so came and picked me up, and I mean,
did your mom and dad approve of him?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't think they ever didn't approve. They never said, hey, because Daddy was 6 years older than I was. Mm-hmm. So here I was, 18, 19 years old, and he was already 25, and what?
Holy crap.
So
you would kill me if I was 18 and dating a 25-year-old.
I don't know. I don't know if I would or not.
Okay.
I mean, anyway, so they never showed their disapproval. Let me just put it to you that way. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was polite, He had a job,
Mm-hmm.
but then he ended up losing his driver's license. Like he got it taken away or something like that. So for the longest time, if we ever wanted to go out, I had to drive.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a real pain in the ass.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, the girl's not supposed to be driving,
Yeah.
type thing. But he eventually got his driver's license back.
Mm-hmm. What was it like when you first met his family?
Awkward. Actually, the very first time I met his family was in the hospital. Because Papa had. Did you know that Papa had half of his lung removed? So I want to say it was his left. So his lower half of his lung, he had removed because he had cancer, and because he smoked a lot, and he had just had his lung removed like 3 days before, and he was still in the hospital, and Mike wanted to go out, but he's like, yeah, he goes, I got to go by and see my dad. It's like, do you want to come with me? And I'm like all nervous and stuff, and I'm like, sure. And so, I just, walked in the hospital, and I don't remember exactly how I was, but I think I would just, I was like, hi, how are you doing? And I'm sorry to hear you're in here, and I wish it was better circumstances that we met in, stuff like that. But eventually he got out of the hospital, and then the first time I really had, and Aunt Karen will tell you this, and I think she might have written it in that letter she wrote for Christmas, for my Christmas book, was the first time I ever had a meal with his entire family. It was kind of awkward because Mrs. Vandermark it's like she didn't eat with us. It's like, so Mike was one of 4 kids, and then he had his parents, so that would equal 6, and then me would be 7. Well, there were only 6 place settings, and I thought, Eric must not be, eating with us or something like that. But it was Mrs. Vandermark. She wouldn't eat until after the family ate, which was really, it was like how she grew up or something. It was just really weird. Anyway, that changed real fast. I was like, this is weird. I don't want to eat if your mom's not going to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of changed things for his family. Mrs. Vandermark started eating with the family.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to that, I guess his family just wasn't very affectionate with each other. But my family was. I mean, like I said, we'd never say goodbye without saying I love you. We'd always give each other a hug and a kiss goodbye. That's just how I was raised. Mm-hmm. And his family wasn't like that. They'd just be like, bye, and walk out the door. Well, whenever I was at his family's house or in their presence, if I was leaving, I'd go and I'd hug them and kiss them on the cheek and say, bye, love you, see you next time or whatever. Mm-hmm. And ever since I started doing that, his siblings started doing that, mm-hmm. which in turn not so much his dad, but his mom would do that, mm-hmm. So it's almost like I kind of changed the affection in his family, mm-hmm. which was kind of cool.
What are some of your, what was a memory that you have when you were, first starting to date Daddy that you, are fond of?
Daddy was just so silly. He was just really, matter of fact, I think it was that picture right there. We had gone to the 4th of July concert down at the Washington Monument, and he'd put his sunglasses upside down, and I tell him it made him look like a bug. So he would always do that, and it was just, he was funny. We'd go to Great Falls, and we'd just sit. At that time, you could climb out on the rocks and sit on the rocks real close to the water. and we do that. You know, we take motorcycle rides. His family had horses, and he and I would go horseback ride, and it was just spending time together, just different things, you know. But one of the funniest memories was he had a Galaxy. His car was a Galaxy. I want to say it was a Galaxy 500 or something like that. And once again, his shifter was on the column, but his was a 5-speed on the column, whereas my Datsun that I had was a 3-speed. So 5-speed on the column. But he and I had gone down to Georgetown, down in D.C., and there was a bar down there that we used to always go to. It was called Crazy Horse. And I don't know if it's still down there or not. But he had gotten drunk. And I didn't drink that much, but I was on the dance floor, and it was when Tom Cruise's movie came out, that one where he's just wearing a shirt and underwear. I can't think of the name of the movie. Anyway, he goes in the movie. Tom Cruise goes down and he has one leg out, type thing. And he goes down and then comes back up. Well, I tried to do that, and I broke my thumb.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to go to the hospital. Well, Mike was too drunk to drive, so I had to drive his car with a broken thumb.
Mm-hmm.
And he had shifter, and I was driving. I broke this thumb, and I'm trying to drive it with a broken thumb. He's drunk, sitting in the passenger seat. I don't know freaking where I'm going, So the picture went out.
It's fine.
Is it still recording me though?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, it's recording my face.
Yes.
Oh, okay. But so that was one of my biggest memories. And we'd go skiing. Daddy taught me how to water ski.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had never water skied before.
Mm-hmm.
And he taught me how to hunt. I'd never gone hunting before. It was like he gave me life in a sense where, I don't know, I guess because he liked to do so much. He liked to snow ski, he liked to water ski, he liked to go hunting, he liked to go fishing. All those things would have taken him away from me, spending time from me. So I took it as if I wanted to spend time with him, I needed to learn how to do these things.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, I was it wasn't like a chore, but it was I really don't feel like learning how to fish, or I really don't feel like learning how to shoot a gun. But after I learned, it was kind of fun. And and I could see in his face, it was almost like how proud he was that, hey, I taught my girlfriend, how to shoot a gun,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just like a proud moment, for him that he's or my girlfriend, oh wow, she just shot a squirrel. That's so cool,
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty cool.
How long did you all date before he ended up proposing?
2 years.
Didn't you say one time that he proposed and you said no?
Yeah. So, because he had proposed on April Fool's Day. And so I didn't take him seriously, and so I thought he was joking around, and so I said no. And then the next time he ended up proposing, we were down in Key West, Florida,
Mm-hmm.
and he proposed. We were out in the water.
In the water, swimming?
No, we were just wading out in the water. It was in Key West. It was called Almirada.
Mm-hmm.
It's spelt like island and then Marada, and it was we were at the Jimmy Buffett bar, and he goes, "Hey, let's just go wade out in the water." And so we had shorts on, so we're out in the water, and he just turned to me and he asked me to marry him. And then when we got back to the bar, that's when he gave me the ring.
Yeah. Did he not have it with him?
Not out. He had it with him, but not out in the water.
He just left the ring at the bar?
I don't remember where he got it. It was in a bag or something like that. He just didn't.
No.
I think he didn't want to take it out in the water to drop it or anything or lose it, or he wanted to ask me first and then wait and to see if I said yes.
Uh-huh.
So
Well, how did you know he wasn't serious the first time, or he was serious the first time?
Because he got mad when I said no. He got really mad. He got offended. But he didn't even at that time on April, when he asked me on April, he didn't even have a ring at that time either. He was just asking me.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, "Will you marry me?"
Mm-hmm.
And I thought,
2 years.
yeah, we had already dated 2 years. But so that was in April, and then we went to Key West like in June. So it was like just 2 months later. And by that time, he had gotten a ring.
So when did you get married?
On June.
So like a year later, or?
No, like a couple weeks later.
A
Yeah, it was like
couple of weeks?
yeah, it was June 22nd.
So he asked you when? The beginning of June?
It might have been the end of May. I think it was like a month. It was like a month later we got married.
How did you plan a wedding that fast?
All we needed was the chapel. So because Papa was a Navy civilian, he worked down the Navy Yard in D.C. He was able to reserve the Navy chapel and the hall, and we just threw it together. I mean, it's no different than Ed asked me, and we got married, 2 months later.
I do not remember this.
Yeah. I could plan on it, it's like, I think you and I are quite alike in this aspect. I think we are both procrastinators, and we work better under pressure. It's like we get the job done. We still get the job done, maybe not as efficiently if we had a lot of time to get it done, but we get the job done when we're under the gun, when we know we have to get it done by a certain date. I think that's where I see you in me. You're like that with school assignments.
Yeah.
You could add that part in here, Joe.
I'm gonna have to. Okay. What did you still have the same job, like after you got married? Like, what were you doing work-wise?
Yeah, I still work for TASK.
Where do you all live?
We well.
Like, did you move in?
That's the
before?
funniest part. Yes, so we lived together before we got married. That's the funny part. So I moved out of my parents' house on King Richard Drive, and Mike and I got an apartment in Annandale. Okay, King Richard Drive was in Annandale, but it was on one side of Annandale. Mike and I got an apartment on the other side of Annandale, on the more of the city side of Annandale. We got a 2-bedroom apartment. My parents, after I moved out of my parents' house, my parents put their house up for sale because they were planning on moving to Florida. Well, they expected their house wasn't going to sell for like several months because they were waiting on a condo to be built in Florida. It was a development that was being built in Florida, so they were waiting on a condo to be built. They didn't think their house was going to sell for like 6 months. Their house sold in 2 days. And so they had no place to live. By the end of the month, they had no place to go. So since Mike and I had a 2-bedroom apartment, my parents moved in with us. And we ended up giving them the master bedroom. And then Mike and I took the guest bedroom, even though it was our apartment. And so we lived together. And then...
How was that?
It was actually convenient because my dad did all the cooking and the laundry and the cleaning. And so it was great, having them there. I mean, it wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't awkward.
How long, had you not lived, how long had you lived in the apartment before they moved in?
Oh, I wouldn't even say, not even a month. A month, maybe 2 months at the most.
So did you still live in that apartment after you got married?
Yeah, we lived in an apartment. So we got married on June 22nd, 1985. And then in 1987 is when we bought the townhouse in Manassas. So that was our first house purchase. My parents had already moved out of the apartment. They moved out within the year, within a year of moving in, their condo got finished and they moved to Florida. So Mike and I stayed at the apartment for like a year by ourselves, married, and then we bought the townhouse.
Why? Like, what made you move out to?
Well, we wanted to buy our own house, and Manassas had not yet really been developed as much. It was still kind of considered um, the sticks, what they called the sticks, like way out in the country type thing. And the pricing out in Manassas that time, I mean, we bought that townhouse, didn't even cost us $90,000. It was only $89,000. And I mean, nowadays, I mean, that's unheard of, but I'm just saying, at that time, $89,000 was a lot, but it was a lot cheaper than buying in the city closer to Fairfax. So Annandale was close to Fairfax. Fairfax was already starting to be built up, and so the prices of housing and stuff like that were a lot more expensive.
What was it like living in Manassas when you first moved out there?
It was nice. I mean, you know, the area we moved into was in a court, what they called a cul-de-sac, and we were in the corner, and great neighbors. I mean, the neighbors we had next door to us. So, unlike any other townhouse, the townhouse we bought was only connected to one other townhouse. So it was just two townhouses together, as opposed to the rest of the neighborhood was a row of like 6 townhouses all together. The neighbor next to us was an African American family, the Moores. They were great people, great, very family oriented as well. And then, neighbors throughout the whole cul-de-sac. We used to have little barbecues in the summer, and most of the people would come to our yard because we had the biggest yard out of anybody in the entire neighborhood. We had the biggest yard. So we'd set up tables and a couple of grills, and we'd grill hamburgers and hot dogs. All the kids would play, and it was a really good neighborhood. We liked it out in Manassas. It was very, at the time we moved out there, like I said, it was out there. It wasn't really, Manassas Mall hadn't been developed yet or anything like that. So, you gotta turn the. Yeah, there we go.
Were you guys wanting to start a family then, or what? Or your thoughts on that, like as a couple?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not proud to say that before Daddy and I got married, I had gotten pregnant, and I ended up aborting that pregnancy, and then we got married, and then shortly after we got married, I found out I was pregnant again, and at the time I found out I was pregnant after we got married, we were down in Florida visiting Scott Anderson, and I had a Jeep. So we had driven a Jeep all the way down to Florida. So that was like a 10, 11 hour drive. Well, it's not advisable for pregnant women to ride in something that bounces a lot. And so here I'm riding in Jeep, but I didn't know I was pregnant, right? And then I got down there, and I started bleeding and having really bad pains, and I'm not like that typically, with my monthly cycle, and they ended up taking me to the hospital, and I found out I was losing the baby, but I didn't even know I was pregnant at the time, so they ended up doing what's called a DNC. I don't know what DNC stands for. You might have to look that up. But it basically is they had to remove the baby, and I almost died actually during the DNC. They had given me Valium to reduce the pain, and that's when I found out I'm allergic to Valium. And they had given me a dose of Valium, and I went into cardiac arrest. And like literally, I almost died. And luckily, obviously, I'm here to say that luckily I didn't. And but I lost that baby, and then it took me 7 years to finally have you in '92.
What was it like during that time, like the 7 years? Like, were you trying to have kids?
Yeah, I never used any type of birth control method or anything like that for those 7 years. And so, year after year, not getting pregnant again, I thought God was punishing me for having when I was in Florida and I had the miscarriage. That's what I meant to say. I had a miscarriage when I was in Florida. I thought that was punishment for aborting the first pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
But then, after the miscarriage, the years before having you, by not getting pregnant, I thought, that God was just like, well, you know what, this is, you're not. I don't know if it was so much I thought that He was punishing me by not having children, but maybe He thought you're not ready to have children. You need to build your marriage. Daddy was still having problems, dealing with, he would smoke marijuana and he'd drink beer. And so he was still having problems dealing with that. And so our marriage was good, but it could have definitely been better. And so I thought to myself, well, maybe God is just sparing us from having children, bringing them into that environment. But then, I got pregnant with you, and, Daddy, he's somewhat changed his ways. And all was good.
Did he act like that, like, before you all got married? Like, was he like that?
Not as I don't. Well, of course, not living. The first year of dating, not living together, I didn't notice it as much, obviously. But then living together, it wasn't too bad. I think it was just the pressures after we got married. For men, I think the responsibilities on them to take care of the bills and take care of the wife and then start a family. I think, in the whole thing with his job, he did construction, and then he got into doing. He had gone to JMU and gotten a degree in geology, and I think that's what he really wanted to do in his life, is do geological type of work. And so the construction job, just didn't make him happy. It brought money in, but it didn't make him happy. And not until he got a job doing excavations and stuff like that is what made him happier. And he didn't focus so much on drinking and stuff like that.
Did you have any other kinds of jobs in your 20s?
Yeah. So when we moved to Manassas in '87, shortly after we bought the house in Manassas, I left TAS and I went to go work for Federal Express.
Mm-hmm.
So I started with Federal Express in November of 1987.
What was, do you think, the hardest part of your 20s?
I mean, definitely, physically was hard losing, or, having the miscarriage, making the choice to have the abortion, because I ended up having complications after the abortion too. I ended up getting an infection and running a fever of like 104. And that was really scary. And then, of course, almost dying from the miscarriage. That was difficult. It was difficult too, being in your 20s and being in my 20s and my parents living so far away, where, my siblings, got to spend more time with my parents than I did. I mean, my parents ended up moving to Florida, before I got married. They came back, obviously, for the wedding, but before we got married, they had moved to Florida. So it was hard, not having them right there for moral support, financial support if I needed it, to just go see them. I'd only be able to reach out on the phone or go. I tried my best to go see them at least once or twice a year.
Did you have any family living around you?
Aunt Susie was the only one that lived in Virginia. She lived in Manassas too. That was one of the other reasons why we moved to Manassas, because she lived there, and tried to be closer to her.
What was, do you think, the happiest part of your 20s?
Obviously, becoming a mother for the first time with you, and just life was good. I mean, it just everything was good. I mean, there's no set thing. I mean, I had a house. I was married. I had a little girl. I was becoming an adult, and I was just happy.
Did you not see yourself as an adult before you had a baby?
I think it was that I just didn't think I could handle the responsibilities, because I had never taken. I mean, me being the youngest in the family, I didn't ever have to take care of anybody younger than me. Occasionally, my sister Debbie, who's the oldest girl in our family, she got married at 18, and then she had her daughter Angel, either when she was 19 or 20. So my niece Angel. Occasionally, when we'd see Angel, I would kind of treat her like she was my little sister. But it's not like I had to take care of her, like change her diaper and stuff like that. So I really didn't know how I would be having to take care of a baby. But I loved being a mother. I loved, it was when they say that you just want someone to love who will love you back unconditionally, like with no expectations or anything like that. That's exactly how it felt. I could love you, and as long as I loved you, that's all you expected from me.
What was it like being a mom?
It was fun. I got to. I mean, you being my first, my oldest, of course. I dressed you up. I mean, I don't think I made you a girly girl. I mean, sometimes I put you in dresses, but not always. I think I gave you, I think that's why you are so much like me. I mean, you kind of grew up as a tomboy in a small sense. I mean, you like to, rough it up, and you'd wear pants. You really weren't into the frilly bows and hair stuff, but you'd wear a dress when you needed to and stuff like that. But just teaching you, it was proud moments to, like I took you to mommy and me swim class at Chin Aquatics, and teaching you how to swim and having you jump from the side of the pool, jump into my arms, teaching you how to ride a bike, just spending time with you and seeing everything that you did for the very first time and how you reacted to it, it was joyful, very joyful. It was fun. I'm not saying there weren't hard times. I mean, there were plenty of times where, I'd have to get up in the middle of the night, like if you were crying or, you need to be fed or changed or you were sick, and all I wanted to sleep, I mean, those are just responsibilities as a mother. Huh?
Did Daddy knock it up?
He did occasionally, but I mean, because his job was more physically demanding at the time, it was just, and I enjoyed getting up. I mean, You know, I had a rocking, like a lounge, that lazy boy recliner in your bedroom, and I'd just hold you and rock, and I'd fall asleep with you in my arms. You know.
What do you think what do you consider your greatest achievement of your 20s? Other than having a kid.
Greatest achievement. When did I? So that was 2000. So I wasn't in my 20s then. I guess the greatest achievement is just, buying a home, starting a family. I don't know anybody else who wouldn't say that that's their greatest achievement. I didn't pursue my college education.
Mm-hmm.
I chose to get married and start a family.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say that college wasn't for me, but I had to make the choice. I felt like if I had gone away to college, that I would have missed the opportunity of marrying Daddy, because the college I wanted to go to was in Oregon, where your Uncle Tom lived. So I would have gone out there to go to college, and Daddy wouldn't have moved out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I chose to get married and be with him over college. And that's, sometimes looking back, I don't want to say that I regret that, but I wish I could have had both. I wish I could have done college and had, gotten married and started a family, because even though I have a good career now, it could definitely be, 100% better if I had a college degree. That's why I stress more on you and Crystal to get your college degree, because you might not think that it matters when applying for a job, but it does. It does. I learned that now, that every job that I've ever applied for, which aren't many, that's one thing I have to say I pride myself in, is I have not had multiple upon multiple jobs in my lifetime. I worked at, like I said, Arthur Treacher's, and then the school board, and then Task, Task, Federal Express, and then General Dynamics. So only 5 jobs in 50 years,
Mm-hmm.
where I've known people who have had 5 jobs in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing I pride myself in, having, that I'm not a job jumper, what I call a job jumper. But I think one of the reasons why I don't jump jobs is because I'm afraid that if I try to apply for the next job, because I don't have a college education, I'm not going to be qualified.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd rather stay with the job that I have right now, that didn't require me to have a college education, but hired me based off of my experience,
Mm-hmm.
and not my education. So that I think that's why I'm afraid to progress in my career, because I don't want to be held back.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What was the biggest difference between your 20s and 30s? Like
2 kids.
transitioning into your 20s to your 30s, like what do you think changed the most? Just having another kid? Like how did you decide that you wanted to have another kid? Like did you always want to have 2 kids, or did you want to have 10 kids? Or?
Well, I wanted to have, me coming from a family of 5, Daddy coming from a family of 4,
Mm-hmm.
we knew we wanted more than one.
Mm-hmm.
And then due to circumstances, we didn't have more than 2. Obviously, after I had Crystal, I wanted to wait another year or two
Mhm.
and try to have a third maybe.
Mhm.
But obviously that didn't happen. But yeah, the biggest difference is going from one kid to having two kids, and I was, at that, like I said, I was working with Federal Express, so the responsibilities of having two kids, and fortunately, Aunt Susie was my daycare provider, so I was very fortunate to have, first of all, be a family member. Second, have her live so close, and I paid her. I just, I didn't pay her a lot,
Mhm.
because the difference being when you started kindergarten, and I put you and Crystal in the daycare center. I mean, that was a huge hit,
Mhm.
to financially,
Mhm.
and I think that's where, you know, just making sure that I, in addition to Mike, together could financially support our family.
Mhm. Why did he get put in the daycare center?
Just for social, for educational reasons. I mean, plus Aunt Susie started taking on more kids, and I just didn't feel it was. I didn't feel it was necessary for you, to um, to it just got too chaotic at her house. Her house just became too chaotic. You know, she just had so many kids, and then I got aggravated. I'd go there. Crystal being 1 year old, I'd go there, and I'd bring a diaper bag of clothes and bottles and stuff like that for Crystal, and I at the end of the day, when I come to pick you guys up, it was like she couldn't find half of my stuff.
Mhm.
She didn't know where the bottle was. Oh, somebody set it down. Well, where, because of the condition of her house, you know, I'd come home with one sock. Well, it's not like I could go out and buy pairs and pairs of socks,
Mhm.
and it just became aggravating.
Mhm.
So, and Susie and Uncle Kevin, they started having their troubles too, and so I just thought it was a better decision, you know.
Mhm.
But that was after Daddy had passed away, though.
Mhm.
So.
How was that like? Like, where were you when you found out about him?
That he had committed suicide.
Yeah.
I'll never forget where I was. I was working for Federal Express, and I was on my delivery route in Oakton, Virginia. I was on White Granite Drive,
Mhm.
and my manager called me on the radio, and he said, "Hey, where are you going to be in the next 30 minutes?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just starting on White Granite Drive. What's up?" And he's like, and he wouldn't tell me over the radio, obviously. And he's like, he goes, I need to come out and meet with you and talk to you. And I'm like, okay, well, this is where I'll be. Not thinking anything
Yeah.
at all. And but then when I was getting ready to walk into one of my buildings, he drove up and he had another manager with him.
Mhm.
And then that's kind of when I'm thinking, okay, why are there two managers here?
Mhm.
I thought I was in trouble,
Mhm.
and my manager stepped out. I don't know if it was Rick Chambers. I don't know who my manager was at the time, but he stepped out, and I was at the back of my truck, and the back of my truck had like and my truck was like one of the big UPS trucks. It was like the big brown truck. It had like a big bumper on the back, and he goes, "You need to sit down," and I'm like, "Okay," and I sat down, and then that's when he told me, he's like, "I got a call from your father-in-law that that your husband is in the hospital. He tried to kill himself."
Mhm.
And I was just like, "What?" And he's like, yeah. He goes, so and so, the other manager that was there, is going to drive you back to the station, and your brother-in-law is coming to pick you up. Uncle Kevin was going to come pick me up.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was in disbelief. And all the way back, on the ride back to the station, I just kept saying, why? I don't understand why. Why would he do this?
Mm-hmm.
And I got back to the station, and I had to go. They had like a locker room where we kept all our belongings, and I went into the locker room to get my purse and stuff like that, or to get my jacket. I think to get my jacket because I had my purse with me to get my jacket and stuff, and I started punching, or not punching, really kind of like pounding on the lockers,
Mm-hmm.
and Melissa Strand, who was one of the girls in the office who worked in the office, came in the locker room, and she's like, "Are you okay?" And she had known what had happened,
Mm-hmm.
and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, I don't understand why." And that's what I just, that's all I feel like that's all I kept saying all day long.
Mm-hmm.
Why? And then Uncle Kevin came and picked me up, and he drove me to Fairfax Hospital, and the doctor, either a doctor or one of the hospital administrators or something like that, came into the waiting room. I was waiting there with Nana was in there, and Eric. I don't know if Karen and Kim were there or not. I can't remember. And I was literally, I was curled up on the floor,
Mm-hmm.
and he came in and told us what happened, and I said I want to see him.
Mm-hmm.
So they took me back to where he was,
Mm-hmm.
and just because I didn't believe it.
So, had he died before he got to the hospital, or?
He did. He had yes, he had died in transit. So he committed suicide at Nana and Papa's house.
Mm-hmm.
He was in his truck at the end of the driveway. You know how like we park in front of the mailbox, stuff like that. That's where he was parked, right there.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how I was told. Nana always got up every morning. She was usually the first one up. She'd get up, put on a pot of coffee, go outside, get the newspaper, come back inside.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she put on a pot of coffee, and she heard the trash truck. And they had problems. They were having problems with the trash men throwing their trash cans.
Mm-hmm.
They were having problems with the trash men throwing their trash cans around.
Mm-hmm.
And like breaking the lids and everything, right? So she heard the trash trucks, and so she looked out that little door window, right there at the top by the top of the steps. She looked out the door, the balcony door, and she saw the trash truck, and she saw Daddy's truck
Mm-hmm.
by the mailbox,
Mm-hmm.
and she's like, "That's weird. Is Mike here?" Because she couldn't really see if he was in the truck or not.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't think anything of it. She put on, her bathrobe or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and she walked outside to go get the newspaper. And when she walked outside, and the newspaper was at the end of the driveway, when she picked up the newspaper, she saw Mike was sitting in his truck. Once again, she really couldn't see him very clearly.
Mm-hmm.
She walked over to him, and then that's when she saw the blood. And she opened the door, and from what she has told me, she said, she asked him, "Did you do this?" And he either said yes or shook his head yes. And she said, "Why?" And he said, "I just want the pain to go away." And then that's when she went back inside, called 911, ambulance came. He had By the time the ambulance came, I think she said he went unconscious. They got him in an ambulance. He died in the ambulance, but they were able to resuscitate him.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they got him to the hospital, and I don't understand. I don't understand two things. Don't understand. Excuse me. I don't understand one thing, but on the flip side, I understand. So he was in Alexandria, where they could have driven, 7-8 miles and taken him to Alexandria Hospital. I don't know if that would have made a difference in saving his life,
Mm-hmm.
but instead they took him to Fairfax Hospital, which was 20 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
So it took longer for them to get there.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason they said they took him to Fairfax Hospital is because Fairfax Hospital is they handle trauma. So, like serious car accidents where people are on the verge of dying.
Mm-hmm.
Fairfax handles trauma emergencies,
Mm-hmm.
where they said Alexandria doesn't. That doesn't really make sense to me, but whatever the case might be. So they took him to Fairfax, got him to Fairfax. Like I said, when they got there, he was fine. When they got him in the emergency room, he died again, and they were trying to resuscitate him to bring him back again, as well as take him into the operating room because he was bleeding so much. They had to stop the bleeding and try to replenish the blood, and they couldn't. He had already lost so much blood,
Mm-hmm.
and that was it.
And he cut his throat.
He had,
Um,
but
So-
what the doctors told me is that's always been a question in my mind. Is this? So Daddy grew up as a hunter.
Mm-hmm.
He learned to hunt from his father.
Mm-hmm.
He learned that if you shoot a deer, if you shoot any animal, or if any animal is dying, it has not died yet. So in this case, say a deer.
Mm-hmm.
If he shoots a deer and he finds a deer, but the deer is not dead, he's not going to let the deer suffer and die suffering.
Mm-hmm.
What you do is you cut the carotid arteries, which are on both sides of your throat,
Mm-hmm.
on both sides of your neck. You cut the carotid artery. An artery is your main blood source.
Mm-hmm.
You cut that, you die within minutes, like not even 5 minutes.
Mhm.
You die. Well, Daddy didn't do that. So when Daddy cut his throat, he stayed on the inside. So his carotid arteries are here.
Mhm.
He cut from here to here,
Mm-hmm.
not touching his carotid arteries, but still bleeding, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But he bled longer.
Mm-hmm.
And from what the doctors say is that's just very unusual. If someone really wanted to take their lives, knowing that if they were to cut the carotid artery, they would die within minutes,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to not cutting it, they would die slowly and more agonizing in a small sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's always surprised me and baffled me, I'm wondering if Daddy really intentionally meant to take his life,
Mm-hmm.
or was he just cutting himself like people cut their wrists? Was he just cutting himself to like a cry for help, reaching out for help,
Mm-hmm.
but not intending on dying from his injuries
Mm-hmm.
or his actions.
So, like, what happened after the hospital? Did you just go home?
I didn't want to go home. Nobody wanted me to go back home. You and Crystal were with Aunt Susie. She picked you guys up from school
Mm-hmm.
and picked you up from school and picked Crystal up from daycare, and or maybe you both were at daycare. I don't know. And maybe you weren't at daycare at that time. I can't remember exactly when you started daycare. Huh? Oh, I can't remember. Anyway, so Aunt Susie picked you guys up, and I went. Yeah, I went home. Um, she didn't bring you home. I couldn't handle you guys being home, and I basically, it's like I tore the bedroom. I went through the bedroom, every piece. I went through his dresser drawers. I went through, you know, the nightstand. Went through all his books. I was just looking for something, a sign, a note, because Nana had said that he left a note, but he wrote the note to them, not to me, or not to you and Crystal either. And I was angered by that. I was like, here I am, the love of his life, and he doesn't even, give me a reason why. All I want to know, once again, is why. Why would you do this? And just ripping through everything, and I found a book in his nightstand, and I don't even know if it was his book, but the book was called "Have you ever felt like giving up lately?" And I opened it up, and there was a piece of paper on this one bookmark, and there's a piece of paper on this one page in the book, and on the book, I opened it up and I read it, the book, and on that page, and it said, "You are the only one that can make yourself happy. No one else can make you happy." And then it almost like came to realization to me that he was never happy with himself. All his happiness came through me, through you, through Crystal, through family, friends. But him by himself, he wasn't happy with himself. And I don't know if he put that piece of paper in that part of the book or it just happened to be there, but that's what I found, and I felt like that was his message to me on why he took his life.
What was it like after that happened?
Well, after that day,
because I remember coming back home. Like I remember Aunt Susie taking us back home and then going upstairs and seeing you in the kitchen with some lady.
right, I think that lady, I want to say that was my friend Mickey from work.
Yeah, I remember she was blonde.
Yeah. I can't remember exactly who it was. But
I thought Mickey was from...
But she was from my next job after Federal Express, but she was one of my customers.
Oh.
And I had become friends with her as a customer.
Okay.
But anyway, what was the question? Oh, afterwards. So when you and Crystal came home, I took you upstairs to your room, and I set you in that recliner. And I just said, I don't remember verbatim what I said, but I think the gist of what I said was, Daddy's not coming home because he got hurt at work. And God couldn't save him. Or the doctors couldn't save him. I said the doctors couldn't save him. And God needed him as an angel up in heaven.
Do you remember how I reacted?
You had just turned 5, 2 weeks before, because this happened on November 19th. And, I think, obviously you cried, but I don't think you had I don't think you were so much, you weren't inquisitive of how did it happen, what happened. I just kept saying, he got hurt at work and he went to the hospital and the doctors couldn't save him. you know. I don't think I said anything more than that.
Mhm.
And I think, your reaction was just, being crying and just, holding on to me. And after that, you became, you know, even more dependent upon me.
Mhm.
And I think that's really was definitely, the changing point, not only in my life, but in your life too, where I couldn't even go out the door. I mean, you didn't even want me to go to work. I couldn't go out the door to go to the next door neighbor's house or mow the lawn or anything. I mean, you want to know where I was all the time.
Mhm.
And, when am I coming home? And you wanted to make sure I was coming back.
Mhm.
And so I think that was um, a big turning point in both of our lives, obviously.
Mhm. So what was it like, just like the weeks following that? Or months?
Well, I didn't go back to work until January. I think I took 2 months off of work. I just,
Did you get paid?
I think I did. I think they put me on disability. Just, it was hard. I didn't know, you know, I, I wasn't prepared. I didn't know the first thing in, you know, planning a funeral, picking out caskets, finding a cemetery. I didn't know about applying for Social Security benefits for you and Crystal. Um, you know, about claiming his life insurance policy, and then I started getting bills from the hospital. The hospital was sending me bills that I'm like, why are they sending me bills? I mean, he died. I didn't understand that. I mean, here I was, 32 years old, and I didn't understand. I didn't understand. I just didn't understand. And thankfully, your Uncle Tom, my brother Tommy, he told me. He said, you know what? You call the hospital. You tell them, your financial situation, that you either they, you know, work with you on payments for those bills, or cut the bill in half and you'll pay what you can on it. And, without his guidance. And so once again, going back to your initial question on this interview of, for my siblings, who do I favor? Who do I look up to? That's one of the reasons why I look up to my brother Tommy, is because he's so knowledgeable. And if he's not knowledgeable in it, he researches it and finds out. And that's who I turn to. And through him, with his guidance and advice and help, is basically how I financially made it through. But as far as, you know, the family dynamics and emotionally and physically, um, you know, things just definitely changed. I wasn't prepared to be a single mom. It's not like having kids and then divorcing somebody, where you kind of mentally prepare. Okay, well, if I want to divorce this person, I know I'm going to be a single mom and I have to do this and this and this. It happened in a 24-hour, boom. I went from one morning I was, married, had a husband, family, and 12 hours later, I'm a single mom. And, I, but I know, even, you know, what is it? It's been 16 years now. 17 years, excuse me, 17 years almost. 17 years later, I think to myself, if it weren't for you and Crystal, um, I don't know what would have motivated me to get up every day to go on with my life, to, you know, to do anything. I had a reason I now had a reason to live and to be a mom. You guys were depending on me. But if I didn't have you guys, I would have had, to me, I would have had nothing. And what reason would it have been for me to, you know, go on living with someone who I love so much?
Did your mom and dad die after that, or was it before?
Yeah, no, my mom and dad they just died 14 years ago.
So that was 3 years later.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you jump into that question?
Well, so what happened in that 3 years between the time Daddy died and the time my mom was the first to die?
Mm-hmm.
In that 3 years, your Aunt Susie went through a lot in her family, with her marriage and her family, and dealing with issues. So hers and my relationship was very strained. My mom's multiple sclerosis had gotten severely worse. And they were still living in Florida at the time. And my father suffered a heart attack. While my father was in the hospital, the doctors told him, because he was my mom's caregiver. He got my mom up in the morning. He had to literally physically lift her up out of bed. You know, my mom's, 125 pounds or so. He had to physically lift her out of bed, put her in the wheelchair, take her out to the kitchen, get her fed, put her in the shower, bathe her, and everything. And when he had the heart attack, the doctors told him, you can't continue doing that. Your body, my dad being 5 years older than my mom, he was, 70, about 70 years old, or 70, he was about 73 years old. He physically couldn't do it anymore. He was having health problems of his own. And so that's when myself and my other siblings, we decided to move my parents here to Virginia. Initially, we wanted to put my mom in a assisted living facility, and my dad could be there too. But Susie adamantly fought to have my parents come live with her and her family. They would build onto their house. Susie and Kevin would build onto their house like an in-law suite. That way she could just take care of my mom and still do her daycare business. So we decided to do that. And while the construction of the house was going on, my parents moved here to Virginia, to Manassas. They lived in an apartment. And Susie would go there every day to their apartment, and take care of them from the time my mom got up. And my mom usually didn't get up until like 10 o'clock in the morning anyway, 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. She'd get my mom up. She'd stay there all day until she put my mom to bed at like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. And then that's how every day went. Then the addition to their house got finished. My parents moved in. I'll never forget, they moved in Easter weekend, so that was April of 2000. And within a month, Susie she'd disappear. She was battling addictions of her own. And I'll never forget my father telling me, he called me up and I'd be talking to him and I'd be like, hey, what's Susie up to? And he's like, I don't know. She left 3 days ago to go get a gallon of milk.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what do you mean 3 days ago? You haven't seen her in 3 days? And he's like, no. She left like on Sunday, said she was going to get a gallon of milk. He goes, she hasn't been home since.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, who's been taking care of Mom? And, because Kevin had his locksmith business.
Mm-hmm.
So, and because my other, Tommy, Debbie, and Wayne, they all lived in other states. And I was the only one here in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
They told me, you need to go get Mom and Dad out of her house.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, like, okay, bring them where? I have a 3-level townhouse. Mom can't go up and down steps.
Mm-hmm.
She's in a wheelchair. But I did. I went and got her out of Susie's house, brought my parents into the townhouse, set them up down in the basement. We had a hospital bed brought into the basement of the townhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom just, the only time, we'd bring her upstairs, like if she had to go to the bathroom or something like that. So, anyway, they lived there until August 10th, which was my mom's birthday. August 10th. My sister Debbie in Indiana had found a nursing home that my mom could be accepted into. And so on August 10th, I put my mom and dad on a plane and sent them to Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the last time I saw my mom, because she ended up passing away on December 13th.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad stayed living in Indiana with my sister Debbie, and until his death, he died on May 10th.
Mm-hmm.
So just 5 months later.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody asks me, how did of course I tell them my mom basically died from complications from her multiple sclerosis. She had it all together in her head.
Mm-hmm.
She could answer questions. It was just the rest of her physical body, her organs started shutting down, stuff like that. But as far as like, hey Mom, asking her a question, what'd you do when you were 20 years old? She'd be able to answer you.
Mm-hmm.
No problem. She had it all together in her head. But her body basically gave up. So she ended up dying from her multiple sclerosis. And then when people ask me how my father passed away, the best answer I give them is he died of a broken heart.
Mm-hmm.
Because, they had been married, almost 50 years. And he, from day one, they were together. He took care of her. He was, like I said, he was her, caregiver.
Mm-hmm.
And without her, he had no reason to live. Sort of like what I was saying, that if I didn't have you and Crystal, I probably would have given up living.
Mm-hmm.
That's how much I was in love with Daddy. And with my dad, he had no reason to live. He had nothing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So he ended up, he stayed in bed a lot. Well, for someone at, 76 years old, laying in bed 23 hours out of the day is not good. Your body has fluids, and if you're laying on your back, those fluids don't go anywhere, they just stay in your chest.
Mm-hmm.
And he developed pneumonia. And my sister took him to the hospital, and because my dad was also diabetic, he had type 2 diabetes, the doctors, when they were trying to treat him with the medication to cure his pneumonia, it would raise his blood sugar. Either raise or lower his blood sugar. Maybe lower or raise his blood sugar. I don't know, whichever way. It would complicate matters with his diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't want him to go into a diabetic coma.
Mhm.
So then they started treating him with his medication for his diabetes. Well, then his pneumonia wasn't getting better. So it was like a catch-22. Which one do you treat?
Mhm.
And he was basically he didn't want to talk to anybody. He just stopped. Like I said, he just stopped living.
Mhm.
And my two oldest siblings, Tommy and Debbie, just decided, don't treat him at all. He doesn't want to live, and so the doctors basically just kept his diabetes. They treated him for his diabetes, but not the pneumonia, and so he technically on the death certificate it says he died of pneumonia, but like I said, I tell people he died of a broken heart because he basically didn't want to live anymore
Mhm.
after my mom passed away.
Mhm. So what was going on in your life during that time?
At that time, where my parents passed away, Ed and I had gotten together, and we decided that we were gonna. We were dating at the time, and we were dating when Nana passed away, and then before my dad passed away is when we had decided we were going to get married in July.
Mhm.
So I was with Ed.
And so you got married and then.
Got married July 15th.
Mhm. How was life like with him back then?
It was started off great. I had, for those 3 years between, Mike's passing and marrying Ed, I basically lived my life for you and Crystal,
Mhm.
and I didn't care so much about the little things in life, like taking care of the house, keeping it clean,
Mhm.
in an orderly fashion, bringing any structure into yours and Crystal's life. It's not like I let you guys, have everything you wanted. If you said, I want a bike, I went and bought you a bike. I'm not saying that, but at the same time, I didn't discipline you very much.
Mhm.
And I think Ed definitely brought that into our family dynamics as far as getting things. I still had Daddy's belongings at the house. I had all his clothes.
Mhm.
I had his hunting stuff. So Ed brought order and structure,
Mhm.
I feel like that's what he brought into our family.
Mhm. And how did you meet him?
At Federal Express, we worked I worked during the day and he worked at night, but I saw him, like when I would be coming back in off the road during the day, he would be just going out on his shift at night.
Mhm.
And there was just one day where he needed a truck to go out on his shift, and I was the first one in that day, and so he asked if he could have my truck, and he said to me, and it was shortly after, it was like about a year after Daddy had died, and he said, hey, I'm sorry to hear about how your husband had passed away. I guess he was working there, but he was working. There's a shift. It's an offloader. So he started off as an offloader on the trucks, and so I would never even see him because that was a night shift.
Mhm.
And so anyway, long story short, he said, "I'm sorry to hear." He said, "My grandfather committed suicide," and so it was almost like I finally found someone that I had, a common denominator with, because I didn't know anybody else who knew someone who committed suicide, or who lost someone from suicide. So in talking to him with that, we became friends, and then there was a outing, like a picnic or something like that, that a group of people at FedEx were having, and I went and he went, and that's when I brought you and Crystal, and he brought Haley, and then you guys, we just started talking,
Mm-hmm.
and then we ended up going for Halloween, going to the pumpkin patch. Do you remember that?
Mm.
Oh. We took you guys to the pumpkin patch and to King's Dominion,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's when he and I started dating.
So were the first couple of years that you all were married?
Sorry.
The first couple of years that you all were married, like it was good,
Yeah.
like it was.
Yeah.
You thought it was gonna be fine.
Yeah. I thought everything would be fine. I mean, you know, we went and saw Uncle Bill and Aunt Jeanette a lot, so that was great for me to have, like, because I didn't have anybody else. I had, Susie and I were distant. Susie was, she was gone at that time. And so I was in Virginia by myself.
Mm-hmm.
Once my parents passed away, it's like the rest of the aunts and uncles and cousins that I spoke of before, where we'd spend a lot of time together. Once my parents passed away, it's like we lost that connection. And then I just didn't communicate with my aunts and uncles and cousins. Mm-hmm. And then my siblings, nobody else lived in Virginia. They all, Uncle Wayne lived in New York, Uncle Tommy in California, and Debbie at that time, was living in Indiana. So I didn't have anybody else. So having Ed bring in Uncle Bill and Aunt Jeanette, meeting them and being able to go spend time with them, and bringing you and Haley and Crystal all together, we had fun times, and we'd go to the hotels, so a couple of times,
Mm-hmm.
And so it was all fun. But I don't. It's like when we moved from the townhouse to the house where we are now. I don't know. I don't know if that's what changed Ed, or I don't know. There's only one thing, and I'll say it to my grave. There's only one thing in this world that makes me love another person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's if they love you and Crystal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I ever asked Ed to do. I didn't ask him to be a replacement father. I tried to ask, I may have asked him to try to be a father figure,
Mm-hmm.
But I knew he was not going to replace your real dad.
Mm-hmm.
So in turn, I just said to him, if you want me to love you, I'm saying this to Ed, if you love my girls, I will love you.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think he ever fulfilled that.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he says to me, even we had this conversation, he and I had this conversation just 2 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
He says, I do love your girls. I have always loved your girls. I lay down my life for them.
Mm-hmm.
I said in response to that, saying it and showing it are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
You could say you love someone, but if you do not show them that you love them, then it's all it is words. I think I don't mean to put a gender stigma on this and say all men are like that a lot of men are not emotional. But obviously, I think women physically show their love towards a man more than a man does to a woman,
Mm-hmm.
or even to kids. I think it's just instilled in a woman to physically show their love and affection and care than a man does. I think a man has to be thrown into that role in order to do that, or taught. And Ed's excuse, and I use that word lightly instead of in a harsh way, the word excuse. His excuse for not physically showing love and attention to you and Crystal is he was never taught. He was never shown any emotional love and support from his own parents or family, from what he could remember. And I told him, I said, but you could have changed that. You could have said, someday when I become a father, I'm not going to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna show my kids love and support, and physical and emotional love.
Mm-hmm.
But you chose not to. You chose to continue the cycle.
So what do you think is your, I guess, greatest life achievement so far? Like, what has been your favorite overall part of your life? And what do you think has been, like, your greatest achievement? And, like, where are you today, like, right now?
Well, I mean, I'm happy. I'm happy with my job.
Mm-hmm.
I think I achieved where I am in my job through initiative, by taking initiative,
Mm-hmm.
and challenging myself and not settling.
Mm-hmm.
Even though now that I'm thinking back, I'm almost contradicting what I said before and saying that I'm afraid to change jobs because of my lack of education, because I don't have a college degree. So it's almost like I'm settling for the job I have now because I don't have a college degree. And then in turn, I'm turning around saying that that I didn't settle. But what I mean by that is even the job I have now, I'm not settling. I mean, I'm always looking to grow and to achieve more and to be recognized. And because of my job, I can't go into great detail to explain that because of the security of my job, but I've been asked many a times to go into a different line of work. But I hold myself back a little bit just, I guess, out of fear. But anyway, getting back to your question, greatest achievement. So I'm good with my job. I'm happy that I have, two beautiful daughters. Well, three. One not being a natural daughter, but I'm just as proud of Haley, my stepdaughter, as I am of you and Crystal and all that you guys have achieved.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I played a big part of that. I was always there to support you guys, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I stood there at every event, at every award ceremony, at every time you guys needed help with homework or a project or to go somewhere. I played the role of both mother and father, and I was fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I knew, even after marrying Ed, that even though Ed played the male role physically of being in the house, I don't think I would have allowed him to take the role of being the father. I feel like when Daddy died, he bestowed that upon me.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think I could handle it at first. But after a while, it's like I didn't want to give it to anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so, stepping back for 1 second, and let me add something to this. One of the reasons I married Ed was not only because I cared for him and I thought that, once again, that he could, he could be a father figure, but I needed somebody for security reasons. And what I mean by that is I was afraid of being a single parent. First of all, I always felt bad whenever I would hear a kid say, yeah, my parents are divorced, or yeah, I don't know my dad, I only live with my mom. I felt bad for those kids, that they didn't have two parents.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't ever want that for you and Crystal. I always wanted you to have two parents. But when I married Ed, I needed him to be there just for the sense of security that if anything were to happen to me, or if I needed to, leave the house to go shopping or something like that, there was someone else that I trusted to be there for you and Crystal,
Mm-hmm.
to take care of you and Crystal. And that's one of the factors of why I married Ed. And it might, looking back now, it might not have been the right decision. But I'm proud of the fact that I was able to give you and Crystal to fulfill some of your dreams in cheerleading. We didn't take a lot of vacations together as a family, but I think the vacations that you and Crystal and I have taken together,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully make up for that.
Mm-hmm.
I know other families take vacations, they take, every summer they go on vacation, or every Christmas they go on vacation. I realize we didn't do that, but the vacations I could afford to go on, I think were memorable for us. My greatest achievements, from day one of giving birth to you and Crystal, is seeing you both grow up, succeed very well in school, become an adult, young woman, go to college. That has to be the answer in the foremost of every parent's mind, to be their greatest achievement in life. If you're a parent, I don't know what parent would answer that question and not say their kids, the success and happiness of their kids. It just is. I think it's selfish for me to say my greatest achievement is all about me and my job and my education. Once I became a parent, it wasn't about me anymore. It was about my children and fulfilling their life. And by you and Crystal succeeding in being happy in life means I did my job as a parent. as a mother, as a caregiver, as a provider. I did my job. Hence, job. So if I'm going to succeed or be successful in anything, it's the job of being a parent.